Well, you heard about that. I've got an event tomorrow evening, but do you know how I got here? This lady here. She is the one that asked me to come out here and work with the Arboretum, and it's been a blessing since then. So, Julia, I have that to thank you for.
And I'm so glad that you were willing to come and do that.
I'm going to give you a little bit of introduction to Julia. I think she has a very interesting introduction to be given. Julia, from high school, graduated from the International School of Nairobi, which there's Kornegays or Kornegays in Johnston County. You're related to some of them, but she graduated from high school in Nairobi. She has an international flair and always has that. Her undergraduate degree was Bachelor's of Science degree in horticulture at NC State. Her master's degree was in plant pathology at NC State. She got her Ph.D. in plant breeding and biometry from Cornell. She was department head from 2003 to 2010, and now in the department she's the director of the graduate programs, works with our graduate students, works with getting new graduate students in and through their programs. Prior to coming to NC State, she was director of Fairchild Tropical Garden, Botanical Garden, and she also served as director of research there. Fairchild, you've heard about Fairchild. It's a tropical botanical garden with international horticulture and just great programs. And Julia basically directed that whole program. During that time that she was there were new gardens that were developed, Richard Simmons Rainforest and the Jewels of the Caribbean habitats. But she also initiated a tropical fruit pavilion and even more. They started a challenge education program with graduate studies aligned with Florida International University. So she's really been involved with academics even during the time that she was at Fairchild Gardens. She's been involved with CIAT, the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. She's been in Colombia. She was the leader of the bean program there for about 5 years as a senior plant breeder. She's published widely, but some of the more interesting things as I read is that she's been interviewed by Martha Stewart on the Martha Stewart Living television program. She's also been a featured scientist on a TV program, The New Explorers, and she's done a lot of radio and newspaper interviews, including Voice of America and National Public Radio, all things considered. So Julia has done a lot of interesting things. She's married to Alfredo Escobar, right there. Alfredo, welcome. And so let's give it up for Julia.
Well, thank you, Ted. I have had a lot of experiences in my life. I've actually had 3 distinct careers, but ending up here back at NC State is one of the best things I have done. And ending back up in floriculture was kind of an amazing experience. It was kind of a circle of life type of thing, because when I did my undergraduate degree in the Department of Horticulture Science, my specialization was in floriculture with Dr. Larson and Dr. Love. Some of you may have known those faculty. They've been gone now quite a while, but they were the floriculture team. And I loved floriculture. But then I went on into plant pathology, and I went in to do my Ph.D., and I worked with beans and field crops, and for many years I was a bean breeder internationally, working at CIAT in Colombia, where I met my husband. I had my 2 children, worked all over Latin America and in Africa. And then when I saw that the Horticulture Science Department was looking for a department head, this was after spending 6 years at Fairchild, I said, this is time to come home to North Carolina, because I'm from North Carolina. I'm Kornegay, as we say, west of 95, and I'm a Kornegay, as you say, east of 95, and we're all related. My father is from Smithfield, and my mother is from Four Oaks. How many of you know where Four Oaks, North Carolina is? Okay. Very small place, But anyway, it was great to be back, department head, and I had made some really great decisions when I was department head, including convincing Dr. Bilderback that he needed to be the director here at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum, and he stayed longer than I thought he would, and I'm so glad that he's seen us through these few years and made some incredible advancements here in the Arboretum during his time. So proud of what he's done. But when I stepped down as department head, I had the luxury of kind of choosing what I wanted to do. So this is that circle of life thing. I decided I wanted to go back into floriculture and be a flower breeder. You know, so when you get to my stage in your career, you know, and you're looking at retirement not too far down, you have that luxury of being able to do that in the university system. So I decided, in addition to my teaching and running the graduate program, I would breed flowers. And I focused on zinnias, which I have always loved. Now when I think about zinnias, I think about summertime. I think most of our experiences of growing zinnias have been in the hot summer. And it's kind of appropriate having this lecture now because isn't the summer solstice a couple of days from now?
A couple days.
Yeah, that's right. So you think about zinnias, you think about summertime is here. But zinnias have been around a long time. They were introduced into Europe in the late 1700s. Actually, Zinnia elegans, or Zinnia violaceae, was introduced in about 1795. So there's been a lot of interest in zinnias for a very long time. And how many of you read Southern Living magazine or know of Southern Living? Okay. Some of you actually may know Steve Bender's articles. He's the Grumpy Gardener. He's a garden writer. He's actually been here to the J.C. Ralston on a number of occasions with the Garden Writers Group. But he's kind of summed up zinnias really well. I think the way they fit in the gardener's, you know, scheme and lifestyle. They're the Toyota Camrys of your garden, you know. And why is that? He says, well, at the end of the day, one dependable, old-time, on the garden center lot still begs to come home with us, and that's the zinnias. Okay? You know, you get a lot of new varieties and cultivars and species that kind of flash through the gardening world. They're the hot thing for a couple of years, and then they kind of fade off. Zinnias are always there. They've been there since the 1700s, so, you know, they are indeed that reliable garden lot favorite. You can count on it. But why is it so popular? Well, it has to be because of the flowers. You know, they're just, I'll move this over just a little bit. I thought I needed to close it. Lots of color, shapes, forms. They grow from very small, dwarfs, to over 3 feet tall. Growth habits. Easy to grow from seed. I think this is one of the reasons most people like them. You know? And it's a great crop to grow with children. Plant the seed, 5 days later, you've got little plants coming up. They're flowering as young plants. They'll continue flowering all summer long. Conditions are right. They tolerate the summer heat. Okay? They'll flower during that hot part of July and August. Many of the varieties are excellent cut flowers, and they can serve as, you know, pollinator attractors. And even hummingbirds will visit zinnias for the nectar. Lots of things going on with zinnias that make them a popular home garden staple. But you may not know this, but they're also very important in the specialty cut flower industry. I had a graduate student who did a survey of the North Carolina cut flower growers. She surveyed 175 growers. That's how many cut flower growers we have here in North Carolina. Did you know that we have that many cut flower growers? They grow what we call the specialty cuts. These are the ones that don't compete with those coming in internationally from Colombia and elsewhere. And she found that 90% of the growers in North Carolina grow zinnias as part of their cut flowers. For example, Alex and Betsy Hitt in Chatham County at Peregrine Farms, organic growers. They grow vegetables, they even have a few turkeys, but in their farm they have cut flowers and they sell to the local farmers market, they sell to individual restaurants, wedding planners, whoever wants cut flowers. And what do you see in here? These are all zinnias. So, lots of different zinnias. All right, so let's think about zinnias for a minute because I'm going to get a bit into the systematics and taxonomy, so it's important to understand a little bit about, the flower structure and how this is used in determining different zinnia species and types. Okay. Now, zinnias are in the Asteraceae family, which is kind of, well, still I think is synonymous with the Compositae family. And this is the family of a large family. It's actually the second largest family. I think orchids are the largest family, and then the Asteraceae. So it's a huge group of plants. And what it is that you have these inflorescence, which is really a composite of flowers. It's not one flower, it's many flowers, the composite in this aster family. And you have different kinds of flowers in this capitula. That's the botanical word for this inflorescence, capitula. The most striking part that everyone thinks about are what we call the ray flowers, where they're actually florets. Each one is an individual flower. These, in the Zinnia genera, are all pistillate. Means that they are all females flowers. They only have a pistil. Here's like a ray flower here with the female flower structure. So it's only female. The second part of this capitula is the center portion, which are the disc flowers. And these are bisexual. These flowers are both male and female. And here's a section of one. What happens is that it has a unique evolutionary design with the fused petals, and then up from this are the fused, making a cylinder of the male stamens. Okay? They come up out of this, pushing out pollen, and associated then with the female stigma. So out from this structure comes pollen from the anthers and a stigma. And these can actually produce quite a bit of pollen around them. Now, if you can see here the ray flowers, you can see here the stigma. That's just the stigma on those, but in this structure is the male and female flower parts. The seeds are produced are called achenes. It's a dry seed. Each floret produces one seed in the ovary, and that's where you get this composite flower of the zinnia. Now, in the middle here is what we call the chaffy scales, and that can be different colors. It can be reddish, brown, orange, yellow, and different colors as well. Generally, the disc flowers are yellow. There is a little bit of variation in that, but generally you find that they are yellow. And of course, the ray flowers can be everything under the sun except blue. Mm-hmm. There's no blue zinnia that I know of. Okay. Then, when you think about what kind of zinnia you want, you have to think about how the florets then are arranged. And this is mainly, we're thinking about those ray flowers. So they talk about the single flower. Of course, this is a single row, generally, of ray flowers around the center, disc flowers. And you can have semi-doubles. Now, that doesn't mean just 2 rows of ray flowers or florets. They can be numerous rows. But you do still have the center portion with the disc flowers, the male and female flowers in the disc being formed. But again, you have multiple rows of ray flowers. And this was kind of advanced when zinnias were first introduced into Europe. They were these kinds. And then during the 1800s, that whole period, they started developing the semi-doubles. And then leading to in the 1900s, the development of the double flowers. Now, as you can see, this doesn't refer to 2 rows of petals, you know. It basically, when you talk about a double flower, in the Zinnias, and I think in Asteraceae in general, it means that it's not producing the disc flowers. It may produce one here and there, but it does not have this showy center or strong center portion. It does have the pistillate, the females, these are all females, but the only way you can get these type of flowers is through breeding and seed programs that actually have ways of pollinating these things, because you have to get the pollen in there under these different florets to reach that female stigma. So these types only came about with more extensive breeding programs and seed management programs so that they could create those. Now, if you're interested in growing zinnias in your garden, you may say, well, you know, I want these really showy types. These are usually large flower types, very popular in the cut flower industry. But if you want pollinators in your garden, I wouldn't go with these kind. This is where you want to go. You want to have the pollen and the nectar in those disc flowers, floret centers, to attract your pollinators. So that's something to consider when you order your seed, when you look at it. They usually have a picture of it in a seed catalog. What do you want? Do you want the large showies, or do you want the ones that are going to attract a lot of butterflies and other pollinators? Okay, let's look now a little bit at Zinnia violaceae. Most of you are probably familiar with Zinnia elegans, right? Everybody grew up elegans, the elegant zinnias, what they were called. That was the common name. The scientific name was Zinnia elegans. Well, a few years back, they discovered that there was actually an earlier reference, a botanical description of these zinnias in 1791 that preceded the description by 2 years of the one in 1793. So, according to the botanical nomenclature rules and regulations, it's the first description that is supposed to be the name of that species. Now, there's a lot of controversy on this because there's some groups that really don't want to change it from elegans. They think that's appropriate. But I think the literature is shifting more and more over to violaceae, although this is not yet set in stone. But I'm going to use violaceae. Okay? This is the most commonly grown zinnia in your home garden and commercially. It is native to Mexico. It was introduced into Europe in the 1790s. Hundreds of varieties have been developed over the time. Many of them are no longer available, or they've been incorporated into new varieties. A rainbow of flower colors, forms and sizes. Plant heights, as I mentioned before, that could go from 6-inch dwarfs with tiny flowers, or big, huge flowers. Or 3+ feet with tiny flowers or huge flowers. You can get all kinds of combinations of growth habits and flower forms in Zinnia violaceae. And so when you order your seed, you have to think about this. Okay, what type of flower do I want? There are the small flowered groups, and there are many different varieties that are out there. Some of them you may be aware of, like Lily Camilla, Button, Thumbelina, Sunbow. These range from basically your single flower to your semi-doubles to your full doubles, these pincushion or beehive types, and the pincushion types like this. Again, from 6-inch to 3 feet. And when you get over, let's say about 2.5 inches or so, you get in then what we call the medium to the large, up to 4 inches or even larger inflorescence. And then within this group, you have a couple of types you can choose from. There's the dahlia flower type, which kind of mainly looks like this, or this, or this. There's a lot of variation in what they call the dahlia types. There's a number of varieties, the giant dahlias. The Benaris are the ones that are probably most commonly used now in cut flower production. They look like this and come in every color except blue. The Magellans, Dreamlands. Oklahoma is a classic old variety, tall, medium-sized blossom. Uproar, peppermint, so forth. Lots of different kinds of colors and forms from the single, the semi-double to the full double but mainly it's the semi-double to the full doubles that are the popular dahlia types. Then you have these ones that are the cactus flower types. They have the ray flowers are actually elongated and curved under. They curl under to form this cactus blossom like inflorescence. Again, they come in lots of different colors. They're generally large flowers. These are some of the most common varieties. There's not a whole lot of variety of the cactus flower types available, not like the dahlia ones. But these are good ones, Verpiana giants, Inca, the cactus giants, and you can get them in single colors or mixes depending on what you want. Then you have the scabiosa flower types. Now these are more in your medium range, about 2.5 inches or so across. It's a very interesting type, this scabiosa. And it has these scabby petals. They're kind of a very unique petal mutation among these ray flowers. They call them the scabby petals. And there's only a couple of varieties of these available, and I can tell you neither one of these will give you a really good scabiosa flower. The seed companies are not doing a good job of maintaining this particular flower form, unfortunately, and it seems to be dying out. It's very hard to get good scabiosa types. Then, of course, they're coming in all kinds of colors and stripes and spots and shapes and so forth, the variegated, the polychrome types, number of different types of varieties, and especially if you get to some of the other species, particularly the Hagianas. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay? There's, if you want to get really showy, you can get into some of these variegated and polychrome types. Unfortunately, all good things have that other side to them. And the other side to the Violaceae are their susceptibilities to diseases. So if you've grown zinnias in your garden, you've seen powdery mildew on them. Okay? You may have even noticed the bacterial leaf and flower spot. With the weather we've been having recently, or up to recently, with the warm and the storms coming up, we're getting a lot of bacterial leaf and flower spot in our disease trials out here at HFL, just right back here. We're actually not even seeing yet any powdery mildew, which is unusual because usually powdery mildew will come in and then it will fight with bacterial spot to find whatever little bit of green leaf is left. And then it just moves up here into the flowers. So that's the problem with Violaceae, is that by midsummer, sometimes it's not looking so good, the leaves are. They're looking pretty ratty. And it can move all the way up into the flowers. So when we did that survey of the cut flower growers, their biggest complaint about the zinnias was the diseases on it. Almost all of the cut flower growers, or the large majority of them, are organic or semi-organic, and they don't spray. So how do they handle this problem? Well, they have to go through and just rip out the crop and plant again. That's how they handle it. So they do successional plantings of zinnias, and they're able to keep the foliage looking fairly nice and keeping the blossoms free of spots. But that's a very expensive way to manage, your cut flowers, just having to reseed and replant and get them started again. There's actually no reason other than the diseases why these Violaceae just can't go all summer long producing flowers. It's the diseases which really makes a difference to them. So if you could have them disease resistant, you wouldn't have to go through those extra expenses of spraying or, transplanting in new ones. You could just use the same ones because they actually love to be cut. You cut them and they come back. They have long stems. They're really a very good cut flower if you keep them well watered and with good fertilization practices. But it's the diseases that do them in. All right. With that, we're going to go into a little bit in systematics. You'll find this fascinating, I know. Okay. Well, depending on who you talk to, there are 17 or more species. Some of them say over 20 of them, some of them lump them down. But let's say there are about 17 that are recognized. Their chromosome numbers vary from 20, 22, 24. There are some that are polyploid. They may double that number. When the taxonomy was first done by Torres, and then especially Torres, he was a big one on the Zinnias. At that time they were doing a lot of cytotaxonomy, which is they were looking at the chromosomes. This was really big. They had discovered the chromosomes. They had the microscopes, the techniques that they could actually look and count chromosomes. And a lot of species started being classified based on chromosome numbers. And to a large extent, Zinnias are too, but they also have some distinct floral and leaf characteristics, which makes sense of the way they are grouped. So the way they're grouped, it's quite complicated. There's actually, within the genus of Zinnia, there's two subgenera. The first one is Diplothrex. Okay. This has the 2N chromosome number of 20. And there are a number of different species in this subgenera. Then the other subgenera is the subgenus Zinnia. And within the subgenus, there's actually two sections. Okay? There's this section, the Mendesia, which is the largest one, and that has kind of a base 2N chromosome number of 22. And then you have the subgenus Zinnia, section Zinnia, where you have Violaceae, and that has the chromosome number of 24. And then you've got some others in here, and some of these are also cut flower, the garden variety types. Now, a lot of these are not grown as varieties, but some of them are, and I'll point them out. So let's start then with some evaluations that we were doing in my program. My program, the objectives are primarily disease resistance. So over the last 2 summers, we evaluated 5 different species of zinnias, and these are the kind of the varieties that were grown for powdery mildew and bacterial leaf and flower spot. In general, the Violaceae, there's no variation in the genetics for powdery mildew. They are susceptible. Just forget it. You're not going to be able to get any resistance out of them. There's no point in even breeding among Violaceae thinking you're going to get something. They're susceptible for powdery mildew. A little bit of variation, kind of depending on the season, for bacterial leaf and flower spot. Not much. I wouldn't work with it, but in a disease resistance breeding program. Now you get into the Hagianas, some of those ones with the polychrome looking flowers. Then you're starting to see something a little bit more interesting here. Some resistance, some intermediates. The Tenuifolia red spider, okay, it's got something there, as well as this Peruviana germplasm accession. But then you get into the Angustifolias, highly resistant. They're immune. The disease organisms fall on them and they don't even recognize it. They could be asparagus, they just do not recognize these as zinnias. So that's interesting. There's something to work with there as a breeder. I get excited about stuff like that. So this summer, we're evaluating those 5 plus 6 more species in the field. Okay? From the Diplothrex, and the Zinnia subgenera in the field and in greenhouse trials. So these are the ones we're evaluating: Juniperfolia citrea cerosa, Angustifolia, that one that was highly resistant to everything, Varieties, which is the one I have over here for you guys to take home, Greggii, bicolor, and then of course the ones that are most commonly known, Violaceae, Hagiana, Peruviana, and Tenuifolia. So let's look at these quickly to show what it means. So the diplothects are the ones with the 20 base chromosome number. These are actually in Mexico shrubs. Okay? They're kind of city-hardy shrubs. They die back in the winter. They come back in the summer. They are low-growing shrubs. They cover the ground. They have this are close up with the cameras. Their flowers are very small. Really, they're ½ inch or less. And they're very, very tiny leaves. And they come in white and yellow, the acerosas, the citreas. The Juniperfolia is a little bit larger. This makes it look large, but it's not. It's a little bit larger, a little bit longer stem, but very tiny leaves within this group of diplothreads. Now in this subgenus Zinnia, in that section Mendesia, of course we're looking at Angustifolia. This is the Cadillac of resistance. There are a number of varieties out there that you can buy commercially. There's a Cascade Beauty, Crystal Star, and Starbright, and others. They come and you can buy them by individual colors or what they call mixes, but your color mixtures here are pretty limited. You've got white, you've got gold, and you've got a little bit of orange. And that's about it, okay, in the Angustifolia. Flowers are a little bit larger. You can get up to maybe 1 inch or so in these types of flowers. Leaves are bigger, but they're still the long strapping leaves, not strapping, but long skinny leaves. Mounding habit, growth habit, maybe about 1 foot, 15 inches or so. Now, what's else in the Mendesia? Well, we have the Maritima Solcito. This is the one variety that's commercially available by Pan American Seeds. When I first started growing this, it was very hard to find seed of it. I was asking around everywhere, and then the seed I got was very poor quality and wouldn't germinate. And then finally, Pan America started producing it again. I think maybe they got the message that somebody wanted this seed, me, and they started producing it again. We got some seed of it, fresh seed of it. Now, this has a little bit of trick to it. If you want to grow this, you get some seed, sow it on open soil, don't cover it. It grows better when it's exposed to light. Now, if you do cover it, it will eventually germinate, but it just takes a lot longer. So just sow it on the top of the soil and let it go. As you can see, there's a little bit of purple tinting in the stems and petioles. It's yellow. It kind of looks like a little bit of like a small rudbeckia or so with a brown center. It has kind of branches that grow kind of straight out and not very tall. You'll try it and see if you like it in your garden. We're also growing bicolor, kind of similar, a little bit different, but this one is a bear to grow. You can get the seed to germinate fine, but boy, it's about impossible to grow. For some reason, it just dies half the time you plant it. I think it may like alkaline soils, and we're going to try that. We have a few that have finally survived in the field. We put a lot of compost in the field. That compost is a pH 7 more or less, so I think maybe that's helping it. But we have a really hard time getting this to grow in the greenhouse. But so far, both of these are looking really good for disease resistance in the field. Now then, let's say we move to the section Zinnia. You've got your Hagianas. There's lots of different, well, not lots of different kinds of Hagianas, but there's probably 5 or 6 commercially available. The Chippendales, the Aztec Sunset, Old Mexico, which is actually a tetraploid. And these have a soft kind of growing habit. They kind of grow out laterally, very soft interbranching stems. The Peruvianas, I'm very interested in them because they have a very upright architecture. They have a kind of a reddish color flower, which is also interesting. There is a yellow germplasm on, and so these are kind of interesting. The one thing about Peruviana, though, is that it self-seeds. It's the only one that seems to be a selfer, self-compatible. The others are outcrossers, and many of them seem to be obligate outcrossers. That means they have to cross with another plant. This one will produce seed itself. And the problem with this thing in a breeding program is that you try emasculating that to be able to cross with it. Very hard to do. So mainly what you do, you end up using this one as a male, taking the pollen to a female. But there has been no, that I know of, no successful hybridizations with that at this point. But it is very interesting. I also think that these are actually the same species, and we're going to be doing a taxonomic study this summer just to see if that is indeed true. Then you get to Violaceae. And I've already kind of talked about this a lot. These are just some of the ones we've grown in our trials over the years. Just absolutely beautiful. What can you say? Man, that's summertime. It really just makes your heart feel good to go out there and see all these zinnias in bloom. Well, one of the things that has happened in the last 20 years was the creation of a new species of zinnias. Okay? Between all those I talked about, there's a new one now, and it's Marilandica. Okay? And it's the result of an interspecific hybridization that was done mainly by Steinmart and Boyle. He was at the University of Maryland and the University of Massachusetts. And they created this interspecific hybrid, and they call it Marilandica for the University of Maryland. And what they did was they took a selection of Zinnia angustifolia, and they crossed it with Violaceae. Now remember, these have different chromosome numbers. Okay? They're in different sections of that subgenus, 22 and 24. So when you cross those two and get an F1, you're going to get an unstable state here. You're going to have 23 chromosomes. And chromosomes don't like to have their pair. You know, they always have to be an odd, even number. You know, so when you get an odd number, they're very unhappy, and mainly they're sterile. But the seed from that cross, that F1 was actually viable. And they were able to grow plants out, but those plants, the F1s, would not produce any viable seed. And they were kind of weird looking too, the plants that they produced. But using colchicine, they were able to double the growing points on some of these weird looking plants and produce a alloid tetraploid with 46 chromosome pairs nicely lined up. That's fertile. And actually, it's self-fertile to a large point. I mean, not completely, but let's see, more than 50% of it will produce viable seed from its own pollination. Well, let me tell you, that has been a revolution in zinnias for the bedding plant industry. Okay? These resulted in the Zaharas and the Profusion varieties that have just rocketed the bedding plant industry. Okay? They have won all kinds of awards everywhere, everywhere they're grown. They are beautifully compact, highly disease resistant. They flower all season. They've got that heat and some drought tolerance. They've got more colors now than angustifolia. They've got reds, they've got pinks, they've got salmons. They've been able to get them into singles, semi-doubles, and double flowers. But they're still bedding plants. They're not cut flowers. They don't have the internode length or the flower quality that would be appropriate for the cut flower industry. But as bedding plants, you cannot beat them. Look at them. They are just absolutely gorgeous all summer long in your garden. They will be there. You have to pull them out in the fall to get rid of them. I really like this. They mix two different kinds of the single and the doubles with different colors. That's spectacular. And how about that? Now, I just particularly like that for the Brumansia. But doesn't that make that pop? By having those double orange ones underneath it. I mean, would you like to have that at your house? I would like to have my Brumansia look like that at my house. Unfortunately, when I saved this photo off the internet, I did not save where it was from, so I lost. I've been trying to find out where it was from, but maybe one of you can find it sometime. But anyway, it was someone's blog, you know, that they posted that. Very, very envious. Absolutely gorgeous. No, absolutely incredible, these Marylandicas. So what is my objective of my breeding program? Well, it is to continue this intercrossing of Zinnia violaceae with other Zinnia species, okay? And then actually intercrossing among those species just to see what happens. Let's try actually intercrossing among some of these. I want to develop fertile interspecific hybrids, select for cutting flowers and bedding plant types, both of them, disease resistance, drought, and heat tolerance. Characterize and utilize the genetic diversity in the Zinnia genus. It's a very interesting genus. Try to utilize it better, more. It's kind of sat there for many, many years. Nobody's been doing much with it. And then train the graduate students in plant breeding methods. And these are my graduate students. Hallie Granitz has just finished up her master's. She did part of her research was doing that survey of the cut flower industry. And that maybe actually be a good seminar to do sometime. That was very interesting, the results she had. Luna from China, she's done a lot of work looking at these different species using modern techniques, not microscope and chromosome countings, but flow cytometry to look at how much DNA is contents in each of them, and looking at how to double the chromosomes. Not using colchicine, but maybe something else was a little less toxic. Travis is right back here. He's been with me now for a year. Travis is working on the bacterial leaf and flower spot. He's characterizing the germplasm and describing the resistance in that. And then he's going to be crossing with the Diplothrix and Violaceae, that first subgenus. And then within among themselves as well. Alexa is my newest student. She's just started with me this summer. She's going to be working on powdery mildew. And the subgenus Zinnia, looking at crossing and compatibility among those different species of Zinnia. My work has been funded by some different agencies. I'd just like to acknowledge them. The Department of Agriculture, the North Carolina Specialty Crops Block Grant. Within our own university, the Center for Plant Breeding and Applied Plant Genomics. They have a plant breeding research and equipment fund. And then the Association of Specialty Cut Flap Growers is also funding some of my work. So with that, I'll bring you back to summertime and zinnias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How about when the flower dies on this bedding plant, does it drop off by itself or?
Well, they look better if you go through them and do a little deadheading, but you don't actually have to, especially among the new double ones. They actually hold up quite well. They just kind of fade out, you know, the other ones. The foliage will grow over them and fade them out, but they, of course, will look better if you go through and deadhead a little bit. And I'm not telling you this, but you can actually go in and collect flowers and collect seeds if you wanted to do that yourself. Save your seeds. Yeah, same.
What part of Mexico do they grow in and what do they look like in a while? Are they all yellow?
Yellow or white, well, it depends on which species. Now, the Violaceae, there's actually some herbarium specimens that have shown some red colors, mainly single flowers, some doubles, smaller heads, but some reds, some yellows, and some whites. The other species are pretty much yellow or white, or maybe a little bit of orange. The Diplothrix are very shrubby looking. You know, they grow low to the ground. They can withstand dry environments, craggy sides of hills, and so forth. The Peruvianas are from Peru, and actually that's maybe why they're so different. They evolved separately, and they self-pollinate, and they're tall, but basically, they actually are native up into, not the Peruvianas, but some of the others up into Texas, Arizona, and that area in the southwest of the United States.
Do the seed companies label their packages with, you know, whether they're highly resistant or not? Do they do that, or is that something that just it's shot in the dark, you just get what you get?
Well, if you're going to buy anything that's a Violaceae, sometimes they will say, like on the Benares, that they're more resistant or more tolerant. And they may be a little bit, but eventually they will come down with it. They will become susceptible. But the Benares they're just kind of really vigorous hybrid plants, and they grow very well, very strong. If you buy the Angustifolias, the crystals, or starbrights, or Cascade Beauties, they will usually say that those are highly resistant. Yeah, they'll usually say in the seed catalog, in the descriptive, yeah. Any of the Marylandicas, you can count on those being highly resistant. I didn't talk about a third disease, which is alternaria, which is a problem in certain areas. It comes in so late here, it's not really much of a problem, but in other areas it could be. They're also resistant to that. You know, it's like this plant from Mars, you know, it's just, where did it come from that none of the diseases recognize it?
I guess maybe it's a dumb question, but, you know, I'm trying to figure out how do diseases pass on from plant to plant? Is it just birds and stuff, or?
Well, the bacteria, the bacterial leaf and flower spot can actually come through the seed. That is seed transmitted. Now, most seed companies will do a pretty good job of roguing it out and keeping it out of our seed, but we've actually gotten some in seed that was produced commercially.
Really?
Yeah. The powdery mildew just seems to be everywhere. I don't know where it comes from. Does anybody know where powdery mildew comes from?
Doesn't that come from the fact that we have a lot of rain and all?
Well, powdery mildew,
Cool nights and warm days?
yes, but it doesn't like wet leaves.
Right.
Yeah. It likes some warm days, but coolish nights, but dry leaves. That favors powdery mildew.
I mean, I try that with some of even my trees and stuff, fruit trees, and I literally had to cut them back so much to get airflow through them.
Yeah.
And even as such, I cut them back, like I have a nectarine tree, and that thing just keeps growing back, and it's like, I'm trying to uncover the fruit so they can, you know, get sun to it.
Yeah.
And it's just like a never not stop growth. It's like,
Well, that's true, you know, and that's one of the things that they tell, you know, home growers, space out your Zinnia, Violaceas, you know, to get airflow, and that does help. But here in North Carolina, it's really hard to control the diseases. You know,
Yeah,
you can spray back, you know, fungicides for powdery mildew. There's really not much you can do for the bacterial blight.
I found powdery mildew on my dog wood.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the powdery mildew on your dog.
I mean, I just sprayed it a couple of times, and it seems like it's working pretty good.
Yeah. And you could do that, you know, and some people do. Some commercial growers, and some of them will do that too. They'll spray as well for powdery mildew.
What are you looking at as an alternative to colchicine?
Well, we were looking at oryzolin, which is a herbicide, and it has been used quite successfully in other ornamentals. And we tried to use it. We did 2 large experiments with different dosage and different ways of applying it, and got very unhappy, you know, unsuccessful. I mean, we got a few doubles, but it wasn't that we could say, oh, this dosage is, the one we need to use, and we'll get the highest number of induced polyploids. No, it was kind of like all over the place. Sometimes it was the lowest concentration, sometimes it was the highest. It was, but in any way, there were not very many plants that we successfully induced. So we're going back to colchicine, trying colchicine.
Treating the seeds or treating the mature
Treating the
plant?
growing points. The active new growing points, meristematic tissue. You have to be very careful working with colchicine. And that's not something I like my young graduate students to be exposed to too much. But of course you can take good precautions on and how you use it, using proper laboratory techniques. Yeah.
You mentioned that the zinnias in the subgenus beginning with a D
Diplotrix.
are subshrubs in their native environment. I don't even know the other subgenus that includes the familiar the Violaceae and the Anglostifolias. Are they perennials in the wild, or are they annuals?
No, they're considered herbs. So basically, they die back. Some of them may be perennial, but generally they come back from the seed in those environments. But there are some that can survive and survive a long time. Violacea could actually survive a long time, really. If it was under the right environments and didn't get diseases, it would just kind of lie down and root and keep on going.
So anywhere in the genus, is there any potential for zone 7 hardy perennial zinnias? There's just no genetics that.
Not that I know of. I mean, you can get seed coming back.
Right, yeah.
But I don't think that we have any that will survive as a perennial.
Grandiflora might be the only one I can think of.
Grandiflora could be one. That's the one that's actually in the Rockies. That's the Rocky Mountain zinnia. And actually, we're not working with that one yet. But that may, it's in certain parts of the Rockies, yeah.
Does it actually have large
That's a
flowers?
Diplotrix. That's the Diplotrix. This is the shrubby type.
Have you tried any of the, where are the other ones you have the Diplotrix from? Do you know where they're at? Or how far south they are in Mexico? Are they further north?
Did you look at the map?
They're pretty all the way down into the Yucatan almost.
Are they high elevation or are they lower elevation?
I think it was 3,000 some feet.
Probably still be pretty
Mid-altitude.
tender.
So.
Yeah. We'll see. We may leave them out there in the field
Yeah,
and
that's
see
what
what
I
they
was
do.
wondering.
Hopefully they'll get some more growth on them, because right now they're about this big. Yeah. But they're hanging in there. Okay, well, I'd like you all then, if you want, to take a solcito home, the marittima, and try it out if you have a place to put it in your garden or in a pot. It does grow like this. It's kind of interesting.
Do they stay low?
They stay very low.
Are there any zinnias that will flower well with less than full sun?
With less than full sun? Well, actually, the Marulambicas do okay with, 6 hours or so. Yeah.
Less than that, though,
Yeah.
there are no woodland species.
That I know of.
Thank you so much,
Okay,
Julia.
you're welcome.